Please take a deep breath. Soften your eyes. Relax your jaw. Feel your shoulders drop. If the only prayer you said was thank you, that would be enough. Meister Eckhart. Piglet noticed that even though he had a very small heart, it could hold a rather large amount of gratitude. Let yourself sit quietly and at ease. Allow your body to be relaxed and open, your breath natural, your heart easy. Begin this practice of gratitude by feeling how year after year you have cared for your own life. Now let yourself begin to acknowledge all that has supported you in this care. With gratitude, I remember the people, animals, plants, insects, creatures of the sky and sea, air and water, fire and earth, all whose joyful exertion blesses my life every day. With gratitude, I remember the care and the labor of 1,000 generations of the elders and ancestors who came before me. I offer my gratitude for the safety and well-being I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the blessings of the earth I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the measure of health I have been given. I offer my gratitude for family and friends I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the community I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the teachings and lessons I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the life I have been given. Continue to breathe gently. Bring to mind someone you care about, someone it is easy to rejoice for. Picture them and feel the natural joy you have for their well-being, for their happiness and success. With each breath, offer them your grateful, heartfelt wishes. May you be joyful. May your happiness increase. May you not be separated from great happiness. May your good fortune and the causes for your joy and happiness increase. Sense the joy and caring in each phrase. You will feel some degree of natural gratitude for the happiness of this loved one. Now extend this practice to another person you care about. Recite the same simple phrases that express your heart's intentions. May you be joyful. May your happiness increase. May you not be separated from great happiness. May your good fortune and the causes for your joy and happiness increase. gradually open the meditation to include neutral people, difficult people, and even enemies, until we extend joy to all beings everywhere, young and old, near and far. Sit quietly for a moment and dwell in joy until the deliberate effort of practice drops away and the intentions of joy blend into the natural joy of your own wise heart. And now gently return to the room as I offer my gratitude to you. May you be joyful. May your happiness increase. May you not be separated from great happiness. May your good fortune and the causes for your joy and happiness increase. And so it is.
Casual way. So welcome, Tegan. Thanks for spending part of your Sunday morning with us. And I thought I would start with a few questions and then proceed with your presentation. How long has Unity been working with DAIS with our fundraising?
I believe since 2004.
2004 with Reverend Joy. Is that cool? That's awesome. Certainly, I've been on the website several times getting ready for this, and obviously DAIS does so many wonderful things, and certainly folks will have some information from you and can go to the website. But one thing that I was wondering is, what are some of the services and tools that DAIS provides to clients that might not readily leap off the webpage or that folks might not even think of?
Some part of our services that I think folks don't necessarily think about, not for direct client services, but out in the community more generally, is something that I'll talk about a little bit, called primary prevention programming. Ultimately, the goal is to have our services not be necessary, that the root causes of violence in our society, that we're seeking to prevent anyone from becoming someone who uses violence against another person, to prevent anyone from becoming someone who has experienced violence. So I think primary prevention programming, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit.
So prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth. All right, good job. Anything else as far as a secondary or not so public service that you folks provide?
That's an interesting question.
Thank you.
um,
The counseling or follow-up?
Sure, yeah.
Finding, did you folks housing after?
Yeah, so So as my introduction mentioned, I've served in a lot of different roles with DAIS. I started as a shelter advocate in 2016, and I transitioned into a role as a legal advocate where I was for the last 2.5 years. I work with folks on our community support services team a lot in that regard too, and I'll sort of transition this into our case management discussion, which is sort of what I'm here to tell you all about. But we're really moving into more of a holistic service provision model because we recognize that there are so many barriers for folks who are trying to leave an unsafe situation and without addressing all of those multifaceted pieces with their strengths and their skills and the supports that they may need or that they have already connected to, it's important to think about all of those things together. So,
One more question. Where will you be after the service?
I will be right over there. And just one thing I always like to say before I talk about this, if this subject is something that brings anything up for you, please feel free to move around, to stand up, to leave the room. I'm happy to talk afterward with anyone who maybe has questions, individually or otherwise. I've also left some cards and some brochures on the table, so if you feel like you need to connect later, our helpline number is on all of those things. It'll be on up there. Call the helpline, it's 24 hours. You can always call me or we can meet up and talk as well. So take care of yourself in this space and go with that. So I'll be over there.
Awesome. Take it away.
Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So this generally is a discussion about our service innovation, a project that we've been working on since I started really at DAIS, but we've been transitioning from the strategic planning that the board and the executive team at the organization has been analyzing and moving forward since 2016. So next slide. 5 reasons for our approach to services and innovating that. The first one is just an increase in demand for services. Like I mentioned, I was a legal advocate. From 2017 to 2018, we had a 55% increase in services. And that ended up being 754 individual clients that we worked with in 2018. We had 3 legal advocates doing that work. We had 15,239 phone calls, individual calls on the helpline in 2018. We had 527 residents in shelter throughout the year. I think something like 270 of those residents were children with their parent who had come into the shelter. And our community support services team assisted 355 people outside of shelter. So in seeking things like housing and job accessibility, safety planning while they're either still in the home, in the unsafe situation, or while they're seeking to find a new space, but not necessarily in shelter, potentially because of our wait list. Which we always have, and that's something that we were cognizant of, and we wanted to figure out how to better serve folks who were constantly waiting for shelter in the meantime. So like I mentioned, this holistic approach to supporting folks. One shelter stay is a 45-day window is rarely enough time for someone to find a safe space to be. Housing in Madison and Dane County generally is notoriously difficult to find, on top of being unaffordable for so many people. So when you have an abusive partner who's potentially controlling your financial ability to find housing, has alienated you from all of your other support systems, or is threatening them as well 45 days just isn't enough time. And so we wanted to really move toward promoting and sustaining long-term relationships with our clients and accessing their strengths and their skills and working beside them and with them toward liberation. We also, received a lot of feedback, and we heard from clients and from best practices and staff that working with clients more regularly and over a longer term with different members in the team was really more successful and sustainable for folks. So it also helps to just promote inter-program work in what we do. As a legal advocate, my clients aren't only dealing with the restraining order that they filed, they're also in need of, talking to somebody about, well, what happens if I wasn't on the lease with this person and now they're not allowed to be near me? What do I do? Who do I speak with? We change locks for folks if we're legally allowed to do so. We help people, access all kinds of services in the community. So really approaching this as a team in seeking to assist them in all the ways that their barriers might be presenting. So, next slide. Just as a concept, liberation is an approach that connects individuals to life-changing and life-sustaining choices so that they can live their best lives and access their skills and their strengths. I think one of the biggest myths about folks who have experienced domestic violence or intimate partner violence is that they're weak. I can tell you firsthand that my clients are the strongest people I've ever met in my life. I'm getting a little teary-eyed just thinking about it. And they've been told by this person and by society and in a lot of different ways that they're not strong and that they aren't worthy and that they aren't somebody who can provide joy and brightness and energy and strength in their lives. And part of our job is telling them that that's not true and reminding them and being that voice in their ear to reject what they're hearing from this abusive person. But it's also to do that logistical, practical brainstorming with them. What are the kinds of things that you're really good at? What do you have? What do you need? What would you like to do? Ideally, what do you want your life to look like? So moving toward that, I think, is really the aim of liberation. Next slide. So from a practical logistical standpoint, case management is the transition from empowerment and the way that services we're working into a more holistic approach, like I mentioned. So we're always going to be trauma informed. That's our starting point with folks. Not only the situation that they may be in when they come and access services, but anything else that they may have experienced. So in thinking about that as well, we've been changing the way that we do intakes and the way that we're thinking about assessing someone for services. So thinking about them and their lives as this multifaceted puzzle of ways that we can provide support, ways that we can co-advocate with other folks in the community who are providing services or who may have resources that our clients can use and take advantage of. It also just expands those connections and maintains a web. One thing that is trauma-informed about this as well is that hopefully this will reduce the number of times somebody has to repeat their story to someone that they are accessing services from, because we're working more closely together. Even within services at DAIS, that's something that we try to minimize, because while this may be the first time that they've shared it, the trauma and the triggering that happens when you talk about things that you've experienced, it can be incredibly challenging and a barrier to accessing services if you don't have the energy to tell one more person, one more stranger to trust, one more face that you've never seen before, with these very vulnerable, intimate details that you probably have a lot of feelings about. So the hope is that that will decrease as well. It also just fosters long-term relationships with our clients. The amount of trust and vulnerability that I've received from my clients as a legal advocate is, the meditation about gratitude was very present and prescient for me, because I'm so incredibly grateful to anyone that I've ever spoken with and who's trusted me in that way, because like I said, it's incredibly difficult and scary to take that first step to share with someone. So in recognizing that, we want to build relationship with folks and be working together, rather than the power dynamic that sometimes unintentionally comes up in service provision and social activism and advocacy. The power dynamic between the social worker and the person accessing services can be another form of power that is not helpful, and it's not trauma-informed. So in trying to minimize that power dynamic as well, and really take a look at what skills and strengths and what can we do here together to move you toward safety and liberation. Next slide. So what can we all do? Community engagement is critical. I often, when I talk to groups of folks, will get teary-eyed thinking about my clients, and I always wish that I could take pictures of the groups that I'm talking to share with our clients, so that they know they're not alone, that people in the community care about this issue, and that it's not acceptable, that violence of any kind is unacceptable, and that there are folks around them, whether they're strangers or neighbors or family members, who are there to support them to move from this abusive, violent situation into safety and freedom and strength. So just talking about domestic violence and intimate partner violence itself, I think, is incredibly powerful and important. This is not an issue for the closet. This is not an issue that's whispered about. It's something that happens to everyone in our community, no matter what their identity, and to continue to think about it as a private matter is incredibly dangerous, first of all, but it's a fallacy. Referring folks to our helpline is the way that anyone will access services. That's the best way to get in touch with us, and that's 24 hours a day. People who have questions about how to support someone, so say you have a friend or a family member and you think that they're experiencing some kind of intimate partner violence, and you want to talk to somebody, you can also call our helpline and say, this is what's going on, how can I support them, how can I help? What can you do? And you can ask about our services and find out more that way. What we'll probably tell you is that supporting and listening and offering that ear and that support to this person is the best thing, the first step that you can do. They know their situation best. They know what they need to do. They've been keeping themselves as safe as they can be for a long time, so telling them what to do isn't really super helpful, although from a friend or a family member perspective, it's very easy to understand why you would want to have this person be safe. But really offering your support, even if the decision that they end up making isn't what you would do, just keep that in mind. So volunteering your time is something that we could not do the work that we do without our volunteers. And I will tell anyone who will listen that as well. I know how much our volunteers do, and I'm incredibly grateful to them for the time and the energy and the knowledge and the compassion and the strength that they bring to our community and to our clients, to our staff as well, the strength and knowledge that they bring in that way too. My new role as a prevention initiatives coordinator is partially about training and education as well. And our next cycle of new advocate training will be at the end of August. We have a lot of different kinds of volunteer positions, so if that's something that you're thinking about doing, feel free to come up and ask me about what that looks like afterward. Give the helpline a call and ask to talk to somebody about what volunteering could look like, and we'll get you connected. So I mentioned before in the Q&A session before that primary prevention is something that we're focusing on in the community, meaning that we're aiming to prevent anyone from becoming someone who uses violence or anyone from becoming somebody who experiences it in our community. And this really requires societal, communal level change from the individual up to all of the systems and the various institutional power structures that we have in our society. So this is a very small job that will take maybe, a week. But really the first thing to do is to be thinking on an individual level, how am I participating or how am I thinking in ways that perpetuate and sustain violence as an option? What are the root causes of intimate partner violence, anti-violence, and anti-oppression work? We'll talk about the gender binary, the idea of power dynamics between men and women. We'll talk about consent and rape culture and how people believing that they have the right to access someone else's body, and how that perpetuates in media, and how that is subtly and subliminally taught to us since we are very small as a society. So primary prevention programming, a lot of what we do is in the schools in the Madison area with middle and high school young male-identified folks and talking to them about healthy masculinity and toxic masculinity and what that looks like. But another thing that we do is something called the Power of One, which is a group for adult male-identified folks who want to be allies in our community and who want to promote safety and equity and the healthy dynamics between people. So if this is something that you feel strongly about, please feel free to get in touch with me about that as well. I said it before, I always want to take pictures and be able to show folks just how many people in the community are out there to support them, and I want to say thank you so much on behalf of our clients and my staff and our volunteers and everyone in the community who maybe hasn't accessed our services yet or is thinking about it. Thank you so much for doing this in-kind Christmas in July program and for having worked with us since 2004. We could not do this work without you all either, and I really would just like to offer my sincere gratitude to all of you for that as well. If you're thinking about it as an individual, how you can donate or things like that, we have our website, a wish list for our shelter residents and for our community clients, the kinds of things that they need. So feel free to look at our website for that. Next slide. So again, thank you so much for your support and your interest. My email is up there, as well as our donor relations manager. Her name is Alexis. Our helpline and our general business line are there. Do you have other questions for me, or? Sure.
So I'm just curious, if you have a sense, or if you can share with us a sense of your different avenues of funding, whether it's federal, state, certainly community support, and how Unity ties into the bigger picture as we plan ahead for the next larger facility down the road.
So we actually just talked about this at our all-staff meeting on Thursday. I don't remember all of the percentage breakdowns, but I can share a little bit just generally with you. So we receive both state and local government funding for some of our programming. We also have private grants that we have been receiving and continue to access. And then a large portion of our work is fundraising and fundraised, especially in shelter. Two of the big grants that we work with regularly are VOCA and VAWA, which you may have seen in the news recently, and individual and community fundraise support really bolsters and provides that layer of safety and foundation between grant cycles when government funding goes up and down and fluctuates. So that's, an incredibly important part of how we sustain and provide services and continue to do so.
I have several, but open up. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? If not, I've got a couple more.
Are there counseling services that try to unite these fighting people, or is it just assumed that they're going to go their own ways?
That's a really great question. I think generally speaking, best practice and research would say that couples counseling is not a good option for folks who are in abusive relationships because of the power dynamic that's happening. There are lots of really knowledgeable professionals and therapists and counselors in the community who work with both sides, but not as like a trying to have a dialogue between folks. There are certified and non-certified batterers treatment providers in the community that folks will sometimes be, as part of a deferred prosecution in a criminal case, be ordered to participate in. There are also just programs that you can access yourself in that way. DAIS doesn't have counselors on our staff, but that is a question that we get a lot of folks asking, who should I go to, where can I find a counselor or a therapist who is trauma informed and has experience in intimate partner violence, and that's something that I'm happy to talk about if you have more questions, but thanks.
Great question. Anyone else? Catherine.
Do you just serve people here in Dane County or the surrounding area?
Thank you. DAIS services are generally for folks in Dane County, but I would never tell someone not to call our helpline because they're living in Rock County or Greene County or up in Bayfield or something like that. We will work with someone on a caller to find services in their area to connect them to folks. I have worked with clients who have family cases in Rock County or other places, but they're living here in Madison, or vice versa, where they have a case here in Dane County, but they're living elsewhere. And we would never turn anyone away from a phone call or an in-person visit without really, looking into how we can connect them with appropriate services in their community. So that's a great question.
Let's do one more. Martin, do that awesome roll. Take it to 10, and then we'll wrap up with other, to 10 and a half, and then other questions can be up on today's table after service.
It has occurred to me in the past to to offer my services. And have you ever had anyone offer their services as a massage therapist for women, especially for men, to offer their services for sensitive, kind touch by a man to a woman who has been abused by a man and not touched very kindly by a man, that service could be available in a controlled setting, in a setting where it's very nurturing and kind.
Thank you for offering that. I don't know anything about your background, but I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's a really individual level service, and we've never had anyone in our facility or on our staff, if I'm understanding your question correctly. I think that's something that is part of the healing process that will look different for everyone, but I'd be happy to talk more about how maybe we could explore something like that, or you know, get you connected to programming in that way. So.
Of course, it wouldn't be for everyone, but it might be a part of some of the victims' healing process.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that is an incredibly individual option for folks. It's going to look different for everyone along that path, but that could certainly be part of someone's healing. So thank you so much for thinking about that in the work that you do.
And it would make sense that perhaps would happen farther down the line once they're in general in a safer space. You bet. So awesome. Thank you, Tegan. Thank you, everyone. We'll finish off the service portion of the service, and then afterwards, Tegan will be at the DAIS table. So let's hear it for Tegan and Martin.